Welcome everybody. Greg Pruitt here with the Idaho Dispatch, and I'm joined today by Mr. Ammon Bundy. Thanks for having us out and giving us a chance to ask some questions.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so you made a big announcement today, and that announcement was that you are indeed running for governor of the state of Idaho.
That's correct. I am throwing my hat in the ring.
Okay. So what is, what kind of led you ultimately to that decision? There's a lot of different public offices somebody could run for, and you're going straight to the top in Idaho. What kind of led you towards that path and deciding to run for governor ultimately?
So there's the reality, and then there's also the kind of the wanting to do what is right, and they've come together. And explain myself a little bit. The reality of it is our forms of government have become more like a kingdom, if you will, like a monarchy rather than a republic. And I don't mean that as trying to be, excite people or get them all riled up about, government and, down on it. It's just a fact that our president, like the President of the United States, has become more like an acting king than a president of a republic. Same with the governors and even the mayors. And we saw this in 2020 where they were just issuing edicts without any type of law, without any type of legislation. We see this quite often, whether it's an executive order or whether, whatever it is, coming from the mayors, coming from the governors, and coming from the presidents. And when you boil it all down and you actually study government and actually look at it, you start to see how through the couple hundred years that we've been in, as a formed government, we have gone from a constitutional republic, and we've kind of gone through the different paths, and we are directed and pretty much has ended up to being more like a monarchy with a type of king. We don't call him king, we call him governor, or we call him mayor, or we call him president, and they have the power to issue edicts, to issue orders, and to have the enforcement of law, to actually enforce those orders without the people's consent, without the legislature's approval. They're allowed to spend money, they're allowed to collect money, they're allowed to do all these things now, which is ultimately not a constitutional republic. So back to your answer, I think it's very important that someone seeks for that position of basically being a king. And I know that scares a lot of people, but it's the reality that someone seeks for that position and then tries to, while they're there, diminish the power that position has to restore it back to a constitutional republic. And so I intend on going and trying to be the king of Idaho. And when I leave, I want to be the governor of a constitutional republic. And that's a very real reality. And so that's kind of the practical part of it. The second part is that when I was in solitary confinement, as you know, my family was attacked by the federal government. They tried to take our ranch in 2014 after decades of legal dispute. And even though we had deeds to our rights, it's been in our family for 140 plus years, 5 generations, the federal government said they were going to come take it, and they did. They come with 213 federal armed agents, and they tried to take our ranch. And people from all over the country, in every state, as far as we can understand, people came and they stood for our family, and ultimately federal government was driven off the land, and we were able to continue to ranch. But they arrested us for that. And they also arrested us for standing for another ranching family in Oregon. And I went through 2 trials. I was acquitted on all charges. But during that time, it took 2 years, and I was in federal prison the entire time with my brothers, my father, and many friends. And half of that time I spent in solitary confinement. And solitary confinement is a very interesting experience. You know, it's difficult, but you also learn who you are, and you learn who God is, or you completely reject Him. I've seen, you know, it goes one way or the other. And during that time, and this was in 2017, and I have it recorded in my journal, I began to feel that when this was over, at some time, I should seek to run for governor of Idaho. And I wrote this all down in my journal in detail. I wrote down the things that I should seek to do once I was governor, and they were very clear to me. And so I knew in the back of my mind at some time that I was going to seek to become the governor of Idaho. And it's really that motivation, that understanding that drove me to this decision, because I gotta be honest, I really don't want to be the governor. I don't.
It's not an easy job.
Yeah, and I'm not a politician, and I'm not a very diplomatic person. But I do believe in the circumstance that we're in now, that's what it's going to take. Someone, if we're going to maintain the good that we have in Idaho and try to tear down the dangerous parts of what's going on, it's going to take someone with, you know, that's been through the fire and that doesn't really want to do what they're doing, but and therefore won't compromise.
Okay. So you'd mentioned, you know, you had this idea that you wanted to become governor once, you know, you were kind of out of solitary confinement and on your to-do list, so to speak. That's a big item on a to-do list. Once you become governor, what would, you know, you'd say you want to change it from being a kingship to an actual governor. I mean, what do you think that would take, and how? I mean, you got 4 years at least if you're in for one term. You know, what do you try and do in that 4 years to make the biggest difference that you can in moving at that direction?
Yeah, so one of the things that I will do is I will try to strip the powers of the governor and restore it back to the legislature. Literally make it so that the checks and balances are much stronger, so that the legislatures have more power, legislature has more power to stand between the people and the bureaucracies of the executive branch, which is, you know, under the control of the governor. And you know, so specifically spending, you know, like the powers that we saw exercised in 2020 with the health districts and so forth. Also, you know, like emergency powers, making sure that the legislature understands that it is their duty to take back the power of an executive officer within a reasonable amount of time in an executive order. And then just minimizing government altogether. Just, you know, abolishing the agencies that don't benefit the people and their freedom. And then cleaning and cutting off the fat of the agencies that do, so that we can literally begin to more easily trade with each other, be in business with each other, and so that we can feel more free to, you know, to travel, and also we feel more free to make the decisions for ourselves, including our health, including the things that are most important to us with our bodies, and just kind of in all make it so that government is functioning, doing the things that they're supposed to do, which is ultimately protect the rights of the people. And that's, in a general sentence, or general paragraph, I should say, what I intend on doing.
Okay. Will there be, I mean, obviously you've just announced, so will there be at some point a more detailed plan? Because a lot of what you mentioned is very broad and generic.
Yes.
You know, a lot of people want to, you know, Republicans that run will say, well, I want to abolish these agencies, or I want to cut spending. And so obviously the follow-up questions are, well, what agencies and what do you want to cut?
Mm-hmm.
And so Is there a plan that you have in place already on details of that, or are you working on that, or what's the status?
Yeah, as I've just announced, I am planning on eliminating property tax. I believe that property tax is an immoral tax because it deifies the state and the counties. So, and ultimately, if you have a property tax, then you don't own your home. You have to basically work for the state your entire life until the day you die in order to stay in your home. And I believe that there's much better ways to fund the state and the counties, very practical, responsible ways to fund the state and the counties. And so property tax is something that I believe has to be eliminated so that a person can own their home, truly own their home, and they can decide what they're going to do with their home, how they're going to live, whether they're going to go out and purchase, for example, they're going to go out and purchase all their food and go out and do all those things, or whether they want to grow their food in their home. Right now, if you've got a property tax that's significant enough that you have to go out and work and in the work field, if you will, just to pay that, it is a destruction of liberty. Also, we see that property values in Idaho have increased significantly, double, 3 times in some cases. Well, the state and the counties are going to expect their share, even though your job, your pay, your wages haven't increased 2 or 3 times, but now they're going to want you to pay 2 or 3 times a property tax. And this is really devastating to families and to property ownership. And so I plan to eliminate that. Another thing that I'm going to eliminate is personal income tax. We already have 9 states that have eliminated personal income tax. And it just shows actually the failure of the Republican establishment here in Idaho that hasn't been something that they have taken off the table. Because again, there's other ways to generate revenue, needed revenue for the state, and there's no need for a personal income tax. So those are 2 huge things. Okay. I intend on implementing restitution and restoration laws rather than, for example, just filling our prisons clear full of prisoners for nonviolent criminals. For example, if someone steals your iPhone in your car, right now what happens is if the person is caught and the iPhone is recovered, the state keeps it for evidence and you don't get it back, and it kind of makes you a victim of yourself, and then they throw that person in jail, and then you have to pay for that person to be in jail. And it's just and it's a very expensive thing. And in fact, some of the statistics of Idaho are we incarcerate more people in the state of Idaho than any other place in the world. We're the highest incarceration rate per capita than any other state in the United States, and the United States incarcerates more people than any other place in the world. And so, that's significant. And why? Because we somehow have got the idea that everything that everybody does puts them in jail. And what should happen is that person that stole your iPhone should restore the iPhone back to you plus the punitive damages. And the state should make sure that you get the iPhone back or a replacement of equal value plus your punitive damages for not having it. And that's basically a biblical penal system that is very clear that the ancient Israel used, that they used during the Magna Carta periods. Anglo-Saxons used it, and our early founders, clear until really about 100 years ago, that was our system. It was a system of restitution. And I believe that in order to have true justice in Idaho and to minimize the penal costs that we have for incarceration and for those type of funds, that it needs to be a restoration type system, not a incarceration type system.
Okay.
And then moving on, I will work, as you know, that's been something that I've been involved in for many, many years, work to secure our federal lands, our federal controlled lands back to Idaho. You can't have a thriving people without the natural resources and the land to do it. And right now, 63% of the the land in Idaho is federally controlled. And there's an attack on our water. There's an attack on basically all our natural resources to be claimed by the federal government. And there's a reason why. There's an estimated $117 trillion worth of subsurface mineral rights in the western United States. And when you have the natural resources, you have wealth and power. And that wealth and power should be the people's, not the government's. And so, we have a housing crisis in Idaho. It's a really affordable housing crisis, what it is. But why? Because of supply and demand. Well, you got 63% of the land being controlled by the federal government in Washington, D.C., our land in Idaho that we can't expand out on. We can't build on. So it causes an inflation of housing. What about the lumber, the timber? Well, we're one of the most timber-rich states in the union, and yet we can't harvest our own timber without Washington, D.C.'s approval. And so what does that cause? It makes it so that Idaho can't be in control or have a huge effect on our lumber costs. Now, I do want to say and recognize that there is a need to keep a lot of this land public and for multiple use purposes so that people can hunt, fish, hike, enjoy. And historically, that's always been done on the same land that ranchers have ranched on, that loggers have logged on, even miners have mined. But the people have established a right in the West to the land to benefit from it recreationally, hunting, and so forth. So there absolutely needs to be that piece of the puzzle, and those rights need to be protected as well. And then finally, I intend on the first day of being in office to use the power of the executive. And again, I explained how I feel it's the executive order should only be done for very specific things, and protecting life in an emergency is one of those things. And I am planned on declaring and using executive order to end all abortion in Idaho on day one. And I'm going to do it in a constitutional way where ultimately I will declare that life begins at conception, and that therefore it is the state's duty to protect that life. And it's not like there's going to be a whole nother system or a whole nother, abortion courts or anything like that. It will simply be that the state and its power to prosecute and to enforce will be used to protect children, those babies, at the beginning of their life, which I believe is conception. So those are the five main things that I'll be running on.
Okay. So you talked about abortion. I want to kind of get into a few policy issues. Abortion is typically a big issue in any state. In Idaho, it's also a very big issue. You talked about life beginning at conception. What is, one of the topics that typically comes up with the abortion issue is, number one, the courts and how the Supreme Court with Roe v. Wade and stuff handles the abortion issue. And then the second part is, what about, cases of rape and incest, and is there punishment for the mom who aborts her baby and that kind of stuff? I mean, what's your views on that, or what would that look
So remember, I'm not trying to be king. I'm actually trying to strip that power down. So by making that order and declaring that life begins at conception, then ultimately what I'm saying is that it is the state's responsibility to look at each case, but the state doesn't make the decision of whether the person's guilty of that or not. That's done through a court process. That's done through a jury, and those things will have to work themselves out. But I will declare, and I intend on making it an executive order when I first go in that that life begins at conception. And then I'll work with the legislature. Then I'll go to the legislature and say, hey, let's work these things out. Let's get these things worked out in our statutes, possibly even a constitutional amendment. Let's make sure that these babies are protected, and so it's like putting a halt on things, putting a stop on things to protect, which is what an executive order in that fashion would be for, and then working properly with the people's representatives and to get it all ironed out and how it should be. And because again, I'm not wanting to be king. It's just the reality of the situation is that that's ultimately what that position is at this time. And so I'm going to use it, and then I'm going to diminish that power into the legislature. And hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Okay. So with another big topic, the Second Amendment. If you become governor, a Democrat is still going to be in office. President Biden is currently in office. There's a lot of talk and a lot of push in Congress right now and through the White House to impose some forms of gun control through either the executive order or through Congress. And so what is your views on the Second Amendment, I guess, specifically, and then, as governor, what would you do or not do in regards to the Second Amendment?
So my view on the Second Amendment is pretty clear, and that is the Second Amendment, right? There's two parts to it, if you ask me, although they completely blend together, but it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And to me, it's just black and white. There's no gray area. And it's very clear that the people have to be armed, and they have to be regularly, or as we know, regularly prepared in order to have a free state. That's just what it says. And so the Second Amendment makes it illegal for the federal government to restrict the arms of the people, have people having guns or other things. And it's that clear. So when you have an administration like the Biden administration that wants to come down on the people and either take their guns away or restrict the use of their guns or restrict even the type of guns they have, it's completely illegal. And so I intend as a governor of enforcing the Second Amendment in the state. Now, there's other governors that have done this, and some are serious and others are just giving conservatives lip service, like what I believe Little is doing. Because they'll say, I'm going to stand for the Second Amendment, and basically then they'll say, well, we won't enforce anything that the federal government wants us to do, which is a good step, right? If they'll even go that far, they'll say that. But what they don't say is that they'll defend the person if the federal government tries to come and enforce the laws. And see, that's what happens. The state will just step back and say, well, that's the federal government, and they'll let the federal government come in with their marshals, the FBI, whatever other agent, the Department of Homeland Security. They'll let them come into the state and actually begin to enforce and incarcerate and imprison the people of the state when it comes to the Second Amendment. And so it takes a lot stronger stand. It takes actually a governor who is willing to stand and use the protection of the state to protect the people and actually stand between the federal government and the people, which is ultimately the job of the state. The federal government was designed to protect the states from the world, from the outside world, outside the borders of our nation. And the state's job is to protect the people from the federal government. And the county's job, again, is another layer of protection for the people. And so that's what the state is there for, and that's what I'll intend to use the power of the state to protect the people with.
Okay. We talked about the lands issue already, kind of covered that. I know that's an issue that's very important to you, and so I don't want to go into too much detail because you already covered the lands issue. Let's talk about briefly healthcare. You know, the healthcare costs across the country continue to rise. It's an issue, I think, in every state. What do you believe should be happening with healthcare, and do you believe you have the ability to do anything as governor when it comes to the healthcare costs that Americans are facing?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question, and I believe the answer is found in freedom, in liberty. When you look at where you can go to get good health care, like high quality, world-renowned health care that's very inexpensive, you have to go outside the United States. You have to go to places like Panama, even Mexico. I mean, how many people, maybe you don't know anybody, but I know a whole bunch of people that I can identify throughout my adult life that have went to Mexico to get the dental care. And high quality dental care. I mean, when you go there, their facilities are way more immaculate, way more advanced than the United States. And most people don't understand that in order to get the best health care, you have to go to where it's more free, where it's less regulated. And then you can then you have another example where you go to up north to Canada, where it is more regulated, where it is less free. And you have a healthcare system up there that is literally breaking its own back, and you've got 6-month waiting lines just to get into a doctor. And so that's the reality. You have that. You got to look at someone like Panama that's very free with their healthcare regulations, medical regulations, to Canada. And so the answer is freedom. So the goal would be for the state to get out of the way. Get out of the doctor's way. Get out of the scientist's way. Protect the doctors and the scientists so that they can actually begin to explore and begin to test and be able to do the things that they need to do so that they can actually find true ways to heal people. And that will drop everything down, and people will come from all over the country to Idaho to get health care, which will boost, our economy. They won't be here to stay either. They'll be here to spend their money, and then they go back home. And so that's how you lower health care. You remove regulation. You create competition. You allow new developments and new science to be applied. And then you protect those people in a sense that they can then be free. And one example of this too is like if a dentist, let's say he goes in and damages your jaw, what's your recourse? You take him to court, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say he's licensed, what's your recourse? You take him to court. Let's say he's unlicensed, what's your recourse? You take him to court. So why do we have to have these highly regulatory bureaucracies that are using this to generate power and money for themselves? Why do you have to have these when the recourse for your damage is the same? And so freeing the state up, allowing people to make a choice is the answer. And it will dramatically drive down health costs and dramatically increase the quality. So that's the solution.
Okay. One of the other issues I want to talk about was obviously the increase in population in Idaho, which has exploded over the last 10 years. I think we were close to 20% increase in population, and a little bit about the housing crisis. And you kind of covered a lot of that, where a lot of people are being driven out of the Treasure Valley, for instance, because the home prices are skyrocketing. Is there any solution really to the housing? You talked about bringing in lumber and cutting back on taxes to help with that. But with so many people moving in, the supply is just so low and the demand is so high. Do you believe there's anything that can really be done at this point to make the housing more affordable?
Well, and there's another reality to this as well, and that is if we want to keep Idaho, Idaho, which that is what our plan is. It's the Keep Idaho, Idaho plan, and we will lay it all out. It's it's going to have it's available to you online at votebundy.com, and as you go through it, you'll see what this plan is. And we want to keep Idaho, Idaho. It's important that we keep Idaho, Idaho, and one of the things to keep Idaho, Idaho is keep Idaho free. There is a very strong reality that we face. As people move into Idaho, it becomes more densely populated. And more densely populated areas vote differently than spread out rural areas. And so it is a reality. In order to keep Idaho, Idaho, in order to keep it out of the hands of the liberal voters, you have to maintain the rural population. And you can't do that without getting control of your land and resources. You cannot do that when 63% of your land is being controlled by the federal government and you can't build on it. You can't spread out into it. You can't do agricultural on it. It's completely controlled by bureaucracies 3,000 miles away. And so, I believe, again, it's a supply and demand thing. As people move in here, we have to have more land to spread out on, because we should maintain the culture of Idaho that you can own 5 acres, 10 acres, 1 acre, if you choose to, that you can be spread out, that your houses aren't so close that you can jump from rooftop to rooftop. I mean, just fly into Las Vegas. Nevada has 89% federally controlled land. That means 11% of the land in Nevada is private or state property. And in order for that many people to live in 11% of the land mass, they have to build houses that you can jump from rooftop to rooftop. And what happened to Nevada? What happened to Arizona? What's happening to the western states? They're starting to turn blue. Why? Because they can't maintain that rural culture. And that will happen to Idaho if we do not get control of our land and resources.
Okay, so last policy question, then we'll kind of get into some other questions. Ballot initiatives. The legislature passed a bill, Senate Bill 1110, that would require signatures to be gathered from all 35 legislative districts instead of the 18 currently. And so there's a lawsuit by a group called Reclaim Idaho to try and stop that. And so the ballot initiative issue has kind of been a hot topic the last few years. What are your thoughts? And this actually came from some of our readers who we said, hey, what do you want to ask the gubernatorial candidates? And the ballot initiative issue was one of them. And so where do you stand on ballot initiatives? What do you think about them?
So government should be held in its constitutional box, right? I mean, it should be limited to the constitutional authorities in which the people have given them. And that includes ballot initiatives. So you shouldn't have a ballot initiative on the table that the people can vote for that authorizes the government to do something that the Constitution doesn't authorize, whether it's the state or the federal Constitution. So ballot initiatives should be limited, just like legislation should be limited to the Constitution. Then with that said, I mean, when you look at ballot initiatives, what they really are is they're a type of mob rule. They're more of a, where basically somebody might have an idea that they want to do, and then they go out and get, the people excited about it, and then they go, hang the person without a trial. And just as an example, and it becomes really like who has the best marketing ability. And so I look at it in those two ways. No matter what the initiative is, it has to be constitutional, or it shouldn't be put on the ballot, period. And two is that we are a constitutional republic. We are not a pure democracy, if you will. We are a constitutional republic, meaning we elect representatives. Those representatives are supposed to get informed. They're supposed to be responsible. They're supposed to recognize whether something is constitutional or not, and then they vote to make it a law in Idaho or a statute in Idaho. And there shouldn't be, in my opinion, this going around that process and leaving it in the hands of basically really good marketers to pass things like gun restrictions or abolishing jury trials. I mean, are these things that we would leave up to basically good marketers that are going to get on the TV and the radio and flyers and mailers to people saying, we need to abolish jury trials because of this, this, and this, and they convince the people, and then everybody goes to the ballot, and then they vote to abolish jury trials? No, that's unconstitutional, and it's outside the bounds in which the legislature even has power to abolish. So those are some of the dangers of initiatives, and I think as governor I would influence the legislature to try to make it so that initiatives are either very restricted and defined within a constitutional boundary, or just get rid of them altogether.
Okay. All right. So last kind of segment here, we're going to talk about some of the hot topics about Ammon Bundy.
Okay.
So, you actually kind of brought up one of the first ones I want to talk about, which was you'd mentioned the standoff in Nevada, the one in Oregon. You've had your own run-ins, so to speak, with the police and the legislature, legislative leadership at the Capitol. What do you say to people who are concerned that you've had these very high-profile, worldwide media coverage events? If you become governor, are they expecting you to get wheeled out, so to speak, of the governor's office because you're doing something or whatever?
So one is you can't trust the corporate media, and most people do, even though they know they can't trust it. I mean, Trump was a good example. The conservatives across the country, most were, really pro-Trump, and the media constantly lied about him, lied about all of his Russian relationships, and for the entire 4 years he was in there, they nonstop were attacking him with complete misrepresentations of the truth. Trump kind of egged it on, and he did a great job at actually diminishing the confidence in the fake news. He fought and battled that, but yet we know and understand what the media was doing to someone like President Trump, but yet then we want to believe in other cases. For example, what happened at the Capitol building. What happened at the Capitol building in Idaho was completely contrary to what the media said happened. We were peaceful. We were there exercising our rights. We did not disrupt any proceedings or any meetings. And myself and others were targeted because we were influencing the legislatures because there were so many people there. And those that are in the establishment, in Idaho, and I can name names if you want, but those people actually plotted and planned to have me trespassed. And they created a circumstance so that would happen. And that's what happens when you fight against the establishment, when you stand up to those in power. And you look at what happened in 2014 at my father's ranch. We've been ranching there for at that point, I think it was 138 years, 5 generations. We didn't ask for that. We didn't instigate that. We just continued to do what we've been doing for multiple generations. And the federal government came down upon us because of environmental policies and because of land control issues, because the federal government wants to get control of the natural resources. It brings a lot of power. So we didn't instigate that. And then you look at what happened at the Hammonds in Oregon. What what the federal government, these federal agencies were doing to the Hammond family is just appalling. The things that they went through for 2 decades, and then in the end to be thrown in prison for 5 years. I mean, and I knew I had a responsibility because of what happened at the Bundy Ranch. I had I had some notoriety. I had reach. I had the media that would listen to me, and I knew that with that responsibility, I had to bring light and attention to the Hammond family, and I did that to the point where they were pardoned by President Trump. And in fact, President Trump only pardoned 17 people, and 3 of those 17 people I advocated for. And if I wouldn't have been so vocal, if I wouldn't have taken such personal risks, and if I wouldn't have done the things I had done, these people would still be in prison today. They would be wrongfully imprisoned. And many, many people across the country would not know the peril that the ranching community is facing, that the logging community is facing, the mining community, and many others. They wouldn't know it. And it's the very reason I'm running for governor. And so to think that I am just a troublemaker is what the corporate media wants you to think. I mean, you're sitting in my home right now. My home is a house of order. I have, an orchard, a home. I have a business. I'm running a campaign now. These are all things of order. And I believe that everything has its order and needs to be put in its order. And so that's what I intend to do. And that's why you should vote for me.
Okay. So I wanted to go back to, you said something, but I didn't want to interrupt you. You said that going back to inside the Capitol and what happened inside the Capitol, at least the first time that some folks had plotted and planned to come after you. Is that something I want to go into details now, but maybe something for another day, but you have evidence that those people plotted that against you?
Absolutely. So I have trial on June 28th. So in just a few days I have trial, and I'll be presenting in front of a jury basically the facts of this. But absolutely, before, during, and after they continued to work on this, I don't want to, because I'm not a victim. I don't look at myself as a victim. But basically, they created a circumstance where they could trespass me. And one of the examples of that is that in order to change the Capitol hours during a legislative session, both the Speaker of the House and the Senate Pro Tem, have to agree upon it. However, on that day, August 25th, they changed the time to 5 o'clock. And then at 5:05, they came in the Lincoln Auditorium and trespassed me and arrested me. But it was only the Speaker of the House that did that. The Pro Temp had nothing to do with it. And so therefore, it was an illegal thing they did. But they actually ordered ISP to arrest and remove me on the basis that the Capitol hours were closed. And that's just one of the things they did. There's several emails where they discussed me, and People's Rights Organization knew that we were going to come during legislative session, and they went through certain processes and plans to trespass me. And that's very specific in the emails. Then we look at what happened while we were there at the Capitol. There was meetings with the governor, Speaker of the House, and the Director of Administration, Keith Reynolds, where they were discussing and planning to trespass me. So absolutely, this was something that they did, and they targeted me. They targeted the People's Rights group. But there's other organizations that were on the list too, other than People's Rights. There was Freedom Man PAC, Idaho Freedom Foundation, Second Amendment Alliance. These are actually on their list when they're saying that they are assessing anti-government groups. And I've got those documents. I could share them with you if you would like.
Okay. Yeah, we'd love to have those. So you actually just brought up another phrase that we have seen a lot to describe you, which is anti-government. Everybody says the Ammon Bundy is anti-government. You're anti-government. You don't want government. Typically, I think that label usually means anarchist, right? With not wanting government. So what do you say to people who say you are anti-government?
So, first of all, I've carried a Constitution in my pocket for almost 7 years. And I've done it because I believe in it. Because I believe that it is crucial to maintaining the balance of freedom and safety. And I'm running for governor. And just those things alone seem to be an oxymoron to anti-government. I believe in limited government. I am anti-corrupt government. I am anti-abusive government. I am anti-overreaching government. But I am not anti-government. I believe that government has a role and a purpose. I believe it needs to be very limited. And I believe the Declaration of Independence outlines perfectly what that role is, and that where rights come from, that they come from God, that they are given to man, and that man institutes government. Man creates government in order to protect the rights that God gave them. And beyond that, there is no purpose of government. But it is very, very important that we do have a unity of government that is protecting those rights. And so I think the easiest way to say it is I'm anti-corrupt government. I'm anti-limited government. I'm anti-abusive government. But I am pro-limited government, pro-non-abusive government, and pro-non-corrupt government.
Okay. All right. So one last question, and then we'll get into. I always let people on these interviews do their campaign pitch to the people, and we let all the candidates do that. And so the last question is regarding a few weeks ago when you had filed the C1 paper, your name popped up, and the entire world announced that you were running for governor of Idaho because you had filed that paperwork. And then the stories started coming out that you weren't registered to vote at that time, which also meant that you weren't a registered Republican.
Correct.
Are you registered now?
No, I'm not registered now.
Not registered.
No.
Okay.
So obviously that was either a real ignorant thing or a very intentional thing. And I'm here to tell you it was very intentional. It was not an oversight that I was not registered to vote. That was a very intentional thing. And the reason why is because we have a very deep-rooted establishment here, Republican establishment mostly, where they have forgot the people. And when I do something, or when I vote, to me it is a sacred thing. And I am giving my consent. I'm giving my consent when I join a party. I'm giving my consent when I vote for an elected representative. And those things are important to me. And so what has happened in Idaho is I moved to Idaho in 2015. I was here for only a few months until when I found out about the Hammonds and got involved in there. And it wasn't, I think it was right around not even 6 months later that I was incarcerated for 2 years. And half that time is in solitary confinement. And when I got out, I wanted nothing to do with politics, with government. I mean, I had my stomach full. All I wanted to do is take care of my family, enjoy them, try to restore the damage that was done to us and heal. That's all I wanted to do. But what I saw was, and that's what I did. But pretty soon I knew I had to go make a living again, and provide for my family. That was my responsibility. So I had to get into that. And then I began to see, it wasn't very long after that they were never going to leave me alone. They were never going to let me just be free and just leave me alone. They weren't. And so it forced me into that. Then I began to look at Idaho. I began to look at what's going on in our country. And I began to see this establishment in Idaho that was very dangerous and very damaging to the people's rights and to government in general. And I just who do I go vote for? Like, you know, who do I support? So, and then of course I talked to you about how I felt I needed to run for governor. Well, you can't run for governor and not be part of a party. Well, I began to look at the platforms. And the Republican platform is a righteous, good platform. It is. But when I look at the individuals, at least in Idaho, who are kind of leading it, I'm not very happy with them. They're not implementing the platform. They're just being political and politicians. So I've taken this opportunity to kind of demonstrate my distaste with the Republican Party. And on September 17th, which is Constitutional Day, I plan on getting, and we're going to make it a whole week. It's a Constitutional week, and we're going to make it a register to vote week in Idaho. And then Constitutional Day, which is September 17th, we're going to make it a register to vote day in Idaho. And I hope with, several thousand people to register to vote. I will register as a Republican, and I will run on the Republican ticket as a governor. And one of the responsibilities that I will have with the influence of the governor is to try to straighten out the Republican Party. And I will say this before I end. I know that I'm not alone in these views. I know it. There are thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of people in Idaho that have chosen not to vote because they feel that they're giving consent to something that they're not okay with. And I think that's one of the things that we need to work on and need to change.
Okay. So you said something, though, that you have to, when you're registering, you can register as an independent, not unaffiliated. You don't have to register as a Republican. In fact, you could run for governor as an independent, right? Is there a reason you don't just run as an independent versus ultimately running in the primary against?
So the Republican platform, again, is a good, strong, righteous platform. And the reality of Idaho is that, we're pretty much a one-party state. I mean, that's just a reality. I mean, I know we say, oh yeah, there's a few Democrats in the legislature, but there's no other that I know of any other party that's ever been elected or at least elected now that's in the legislature. That's either, Republican, probably 7/8 of them are the legislature, 7/8 of them are Republicans, and the remainder are Democrat, none the rest. So why would I go through all of this effort and energy, spend all of this money, get all of this movement, and just to be unsuccessful? The reality is Republicans get voted in to office. And the Republican platform is a good, righteous platform. So it would only make common sense that I would run as a Republican.
Okay. Before you moved to Idaho, were you registered?
Yeah, I was registered. So I lived in Arizona. I was registered. I mean, I was the guy that, wore my vote. I voted pin for a week. I was the guy that had, Ron Paul signs, like, 20 Ron Paul signs in my front yard, and 5 or 6 American flags flying high. That was me. I was that crazy guy, I mean, I don't think it's crazy, but it meant a lot to me, I mean, it does mean a lot to me. And it's just opposite of what they want to make it out of, but that's fine. That's fine. It means a lot to me. It is literally my consent that I'm giving to somebody else to be my representative. And that's important. And I think that, the Republican Party in Idaho hasn't been true to that. And so I'm protesting them a little bit. I'm doing a little demonstration here by not registering, and it is intentional.
Okay. And actually, I got one more. I know that's been brought up a number of times. Governor Little has not officially announced. Everybody's anticipating that he's running. I think Ed Humphreys was one of the first challengers to get in. Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeehan has also gotten into the race, and there's a number of, I think, 3 or 4 other candidates other than yourself. and now you've announced. And so, some of the conservatives in Idaho have said there's too many people in. You're going to help split the vote. You should just back Janice, or you should back another candidate, or whatever. What is your response to people who say there's too many people in the race? And would you consider getting out at some point if you felt like your movement wasn't there, or are you in it all the way through the primary?
So first of all, to the people that are saying that, we've got almost 11 months before. There's so much that can happen between now and then. And that could push one candidate or not another to the top and challenge the incumbent. Because ultimately that's what they're saying, right? And I intend on hitting the ground. We've just announced, so we're going to hit the ground running hard. This campaign will be different in many aspects than most campaigns you've ever seen. I'm a candidate that's not a normal candidate. I've never run for office before, other than student body president when I was a junior in high school, and I did enjoy being the student body president, but that's not anything to speak of as far as being an elected representative. So it's going to be a lot different. But I'm giving the people of Idaho a choice. What do they want? I'm being very clear in what I believe. I've been clear, very, very clear in the past. I don't play politics. I'm not going to negotiate the people's rights away from them. I'm going to stand for them. They know what they are getting with me. And so, it's kind of like the old saying, one bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. I don't know if you've heard that before, but, I'm the bird in the hand. You know what you get with me. And so I'm giving the people a choice. Now, if we get, I'll just give you some reality here, when Biden, because it's not a matter of if, it's when the Biden administration comes down on the people, either on their right to bear arms, their, body, their right to control their body and their health care, and whatever it might be. I can go through probably a serious 10 items that most likely he's going to come down on the people with. And he's going to try to force that on the people through federal force. Let's say any one of those comes down on the people during this campaign. Well, who are the people going to say, who is going to fight the federal government? Who's going to protect our rights? Who has proven to actually do it in the past? Who's going to be the one to stand as a buffer and a barrier between the people's rights, mine and your rights, and everybody in Idaho's rights, against an overreaching, abusive federal government, or even a state government? Who's going to do that? And I think the answer is very clear. I think my past has shown it. I've been very effective. I haven't been orthodoxed, but I have certainly been effective, and I will continue to do that. I will continue to stand for the people. So now if we get to the end, kind of to finish off here, if we get to the end and, let's say another candidate, I don't even know who's all running, but let's say that they're way ahead. It appears, I don't know how you determine, that, but if we can honestly determine that someone is way ahead, I'm here for liberty. I'm here to try to further the liberty of the people, not to hurt it. And I will certainly consider that. But if I do my job right, and if the people look at it in a correct way, which is that the government is there to defend their rights, then I think the answer becomes very clear of who the Republican nominee should be.
Okay. Well, it was somewhat of a last campaign pitch there, but typically what I'll do is have you look at the camera and then just talk to the people, tell them where they can go to learn more about you and all that stuff, and give your last pitch to the camera. All
right, so you can go to votebundy.com. There will be my Keep Idaho plan. It's all laid out for you. It'll be kind of my responses to what the corporate media has said, 3 lies, the main 3 lies that they have said about me, and I kind of flushed them out. And then also just all the other details, videos. There's a lot of content there. You can donate there. So go to votebundy.com and ultimately ask yourself what the purpose of government is and who is going to fill that purpose the best. And maybe look around the world, look towards Washington, D.C., look towards some of the bureaucracies in the state, and ask yourself who's going to be the one to be the buffer. And that's all I'm asking.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank